As you can see, I've got 2 glasses of wine because of load shedding.
So you're loaded.
Not yet, but I will be. Thank you for the invitation. I've been sitting by my phone for months. I don't know why it took you so long to phone me. This is a record of a trip that I made in December 22. So that was, what are we now? April. 4 months ago. I had been wanting to go for many years. My friend Alistair Teeling-Smith went, in my mind, he went 10 years ago, but when I said I was going, he came around and actually turned out he went 25 years ago. And he went the old-fashioned ship way, but that was a 6-week round trip, and I couldn't afford the time. And then it's amazing how COVID has changed everything, being beaten into submission. And this year, I'm not flying anywhere. I can't believe it. I'm actually driving to Uganda with Bridget Hilton Barber. And because I enjoyed this last trip so much, I had to write an essay like a schoolboy on why I want to visit Tristan da Cunha. And I've been approved, but now I just have to get a berth on a fishing boat to get there. Anyway, so I had been watching this. I've been watching this for like 10 years. And then I decided I was going to go. And then I saw my friend Monica, and she said, could she come with me? So I said, sure. And the next day she said, could Evan, her son, come with me? I said, sure. So we booked and we set off. This gives you some idea. It's better if you see Saint Helena on a globe, because it gives you a better perspective of how it looks, because it doesn't necessarily look like it's on the way, but actually it's kind of interesting. So the mother country, fuck the mother country. And what's left of them, I need a visa to visit them, is Britain and its BOTs, the British Overseas Territories, of which there are 13 or 14. So starting from the east, Pitcairn Island, some of the Caribbean, the Falklands, the Georgia Islands, there are a couple in Europe, Gibraltar, Cyprus still has some, and then the really disgraceful one. I'm too scared to touch anything because we don't want to mess with technology. But the one on the right are the Chagos Islands. The people were basically thrown off, and the United Nations have actually said that Britain should return it to them. But there's one rule for the British, there's one rule for the Russians, there's one rule for the rest of us, and there's one rule for South Africans. So the one that I'm looking at are the 3 in the middle. Saint Helena, Ascension Island, and Tristan da Cunha. I love this. I live in Johannesburg, South Africa. There is only one flight once a week from one city, and it's Joburg. And it leaves on a Saturday morning, and it carries on to Nambia, Donald Trump's favorite place, to top up, because if there's a problem, you need to be able to circle the island, and in a worst case scenario, you need to fly onto Ascension Island. So we flew, and then so it flies once a week. Once a month, the flight carries on to Ascension Island. And on our flight back, there was some stroppy bitch who, like, the plane is already taxied. She's like, "Oi, what's that luggage doing on the runway?" So they had taken luggage off to put onions and eggs onto the plane. Do not underestimate the importance of eggs and onions. Anyway, the plane was delayed by 4 hours. The eggs and the onions were taken off the plane, and the luggage was put on the plane, which delayed the flight to Ascension Island, which meant that it didn't go to Ascension Island that day. It had to come back the next day. We were nearly delayed, but anyway, it all worked out in the end. So I discovered a couple of kind of interesting things as well. This map will come up again, because the one map that we never see is what the world looks like without oceans. And this gives you some idea. And I saw this map, and this image will come up a little bit later again. Sitting in, Monica, you might have to prompt me. What was the restaurant at the bottom of the hill? Anna's Place or Margaret's Place or some chick's place. Anyway, it had been touched so many times. Oh, that sounds a little bit gross, sorry. That Ascension Island and Saint Helena had both been rubbed out. But then in January, a friend of mine in Durban died, and I went down to Durban, and I found that in Durban and in Cape Town, if you have a number, you can go to this place and they'll print the map out for you. And I'm a map pornist. So this, what I quite liked is it shows you the ridge. There is a ridge that runs down the middle of the Atlantic. Although interestingly enough, Saint Helena does not sit on it. It's a bit like a big zit that sits to the east. So we flew into Namibia, and I did a 30-day camp as a naval scene and all that. So we sat there for about an hour. We top up with fuel, and then you fly over the South Atlantic about another 3 hours. And then out of the mists, island literally, I think there are like 2 beaches on the entire island, and neither of them is very nice. It's volcanic, and it literally rises straight out. I mean, when I say this is it, it's a zit. So I'm super impressed with my graphic skills here. I managed to like animate a plane. In fact, I've made a movie. It's on YouTube. Please like it. Anyway, so we land, and I'm so excited. I'm worse than a schoolboy. I have checked which way the plane lands, how you land, where you need to sit to get the picture. And for once in my goddamn life, it was right. You need to sit at the front on the right, as we say, starboard, because you basically, you can see the plane as you land. I mean, the land as you land. So the runway was built by Basil Reed. It was a huge problem because of the land is exceptionally vertical. So the building the runway was a problem to start with. Then there was the wind shear problem. They finished it in 2015. The first flights arrived in 2016, and there continued to be a wind shear problem. And then COVID, I'm not sure if any of you have heard of COVID. It came along and it delayed things until I had been watching Airlink. If you go into their diagnostics, you'll see that I am definitely the person that hung out on their porn website the longest. Anyway, in about October, I saw that they had started flights. So we landed. This slide is slightly out of sequence because it was actually from where we were staying at Tudor Cottage round all the way into Jamestown. So we flew on the Airlink. So essentially only Embraer 190s can land. I think there were 100 people on the plane. It was December, so it was basically saints who were coming home for Christmas. There were very few tourists, maybe 10. They were all coming home for Christmas. So a lot of them work in the Falkland Islands, but the only way that they can get there is, actually, I think from the Falkland Islands, you can fly to Ascension Island, because Ascension Island was where the Brits were bombing the shit out of the Argentinians. You guys are probably too young to remember, but. So Saint Helena Airport was built by Basil Reed at the cost of about £300 million, thanks British taxpayer, for the one flight once a week. I was hyper excited. I am so childish that during January, February of this year, I've taken my 14 passports and I have catalogued every single visa and every single entry and departure stamp that I've done. How childish is that? Anyway, it was quite exciting to land. The island was discovered in 1502, and the story is going to sound repetitive. It was discovered in 1502 by the Portuguese. Then along came the Dutch, and then along came our friends, the English, who took over and have never left. At its peak, Saint Helena was never settled by any native population. At its peak, it was being visited by 1,000 ships a year, which is kind of interesting. But eventually, as the Portuguese and the Dutch and the English discovered more bases as they fucked up the rest of Africa, Saint Helena became less important. So that first day, we had probably, Monica, the worst car that has ever been seen to humanity. You couldn't close the window. To close the window, you had to get out of the car, close the door, switch off the engine, then get back in the car, and then switch on the engine, and then the window would close. Not that we cared about anything except maybe rain. But this is the entrance down. I mean, it's very interesting. It's largely Georgian architecture, and it sits on the north side of the island in a very narrow gully. There was a woman called Hazel Wilmot who was particularly helpful, and the ship came once every 4 weeks. But while we were there, the company expressed their kind of less interest, and now the ship will only go once every 6 weeks. And the ship only takes goods. You can't travel by ship. You can only travel by plane. This was, I think this was this Sunday morning. I can't actually remember. No, this was still Saturday afternoon. So sweet. They've got their own currency. It is 22 Rand to the Saint Helena pound. I don't know what Charles is I don't know when Charles will come out, but it's 1-to-1 for them. It's 25 fuck to us. So we were staying, Edward Thorpe, who's part of the Thorpe dynasty, very kindly rented out, because there was an accommodation crisis at the end, but we were staying sort of in the middle of the island, below Diana's Peak, which I'll come back to, which in the early mornings was very misty. So the island has got like a dryness around the edges, and there's a subtropical part in the middle, which you'll see. So we arrived on the 8th of December. So it was the lead up to Christmas. This is the main street. Looks a bit like Simonstown with electricity. And then the Saints, the population, there are about 4,500 people. It's basically Monica, who you'll meet later, is colored, and she said, I want to go where colored is king, and it's here. Except they all speak with an English accent, so it's lovely. They all talk like that, but when they're talking to each other, you don't understand what they're saying. Anyway, it's Christmas, it's lead up to Christmas, carols, and I think France was playing England that day in the World Cup. Anyway, we were in the Consulate Hotel run by Hazel Wilmot, and every picture is a variation of Napoleon. So no wonder the French beat the English. Anyway, we were back up round the back. The biggest problem that they made was the introduction of flax to make rope and postal bags for the British. And then in 1956, the British said, I think we're going to use plastic. So now the whole island has been taken over by flax. This was clearly Evan's choice of music, not mine. So Sunday morning, we had heard that Edward thought was going to, and that's Nap, the top there, Nap Bob, at the Consulate Hotel. And we heard that he did walks every Sunday morning. So we gathered in town, and it does have this kind of charming Scottish, Irish, joyless architecture to it, and food to match. So we weren't sure what was going to happen, but we hung around, and then it's a bit like clubbing. Everyone, actually, there are a bunch of clubbers, you know. So we did meet Edward, and we drove Jacob's Ladder, which is the very famous ladder, the 699 stairs, which go up from the bottom up to the east, to the west, is closed for renovation. So we drove to, I think it was Rosemary Plain. I've made a movie of this whole thing. It's on YouTube, and Edward's corrected me, so most of what I've said is correct. We walked down, which was great, and then Monica took the boat back, which was greater, and I walked back, and my legs ached for 3 days. So that's looking down into Jamestown. And you can see they've made a new highway up to the left, which opened after we left. We walked down to Lemon Valley, which was great going down, not so great coming back. And that's Monica's boat. So it was literally one day out back into Jamestown. And there's the trio of agapanthi. Is that the plural of agapanthus? I'm not sure. You can see on the bottom left, you can see the green shade netting of Jacob's Ladder. And then the main street. There was a fair amount of pouring of wine and pouring over maps. I had bought a map. Well, there was actually a map there already, but I bought the updated version, which is kind of interesting because when we went down to Lot's wife's ponds, there's a peak there called Nigger's Head. That's now been changed to Gorilla's Head, which, if you think about it, is not much of an improvement. Hello. Anyway, every morning there was a lot of poring over the maps and looking at there are 21 post box walks. Some of them are fairly easy, some of them are not. But this was, I love maps. I'm map crazy. So this was, and as you can see by the contours, how crazy it is. There's Jacob's Ladder, the Emporium, which is a bit of a euphemism, but and Napoleon's tomb. So Napoleon was brought here in 1815, and he died in 1821. And the circumstances of his death are not clear. I mean, they're kind of conspiracy theories. I mean, maybe he died of cyanide, or the paint on the wall, or bad English food, or what, I don't know. The French still actually have an official representative there, so they pay for everything. About 20 years later, he was moved to head office. He's buried at, I think it's Les Invalides. But it's a lovely walk down to his, which I suppose is now a sarcophagus. Beautiful plants, some indigenous, some are not. Frogs. Monica's a doctor. So we found ourselves at the hospital. She liked it so much that she wants to, oh, do you still want to go and do a locum there? Okay. So anyway, Monica will be moving to the hospital. It's a 28-bed hospital. They've actually got a really, really good health system. They've got a 28-bed hospital. They can deal with most problems. The biggest problems are lifestyle diseases, but they shuttle a lot of people back to South Africa for serious cases. They've got a terrible internet connection. It's, I think, 70 Rand for 30 minutes or something like that. But the upshot of that is you can get Al Hello magazine and Lovely and all that stuff in the library. And then Monica's got ancestors there, and you can see on the 11th of January, was it 1861? Yeah, 1861. Her ancestor, Daniel Lappin, died, a male of 31. And you can see it looks like it was written, but it was delirium tremens, which we know what that is now. It's drinking too much. I will probably die of that. Here's the post office, which actually was a really lovely working post office. I bought them. That's where I bought the map, the one with the gorilla's head, for £10. This was the restaurant. And this was the map that has been touched so much that you can see the two skid marks in the middle where Saint Helena and Ascension Island both disappeared. So, but what I did do is I managed to find somewhere on there the number. And then when I got to Durban, I gave them the number and they printed it out. It's like a detective's trail. It was great. The food was pleasant enough. They do a lot of tuna fishing, but it was December, so all the family had come back. So nobody was that interested in fishing. So let's look after yourselves, mates. But and the prices are in pounds. So 8, 9, 12 pounds. Yeah, sort of reasonable. I think this was tuna and chops, quite nice chops. And this was the party bus. There actually literally is a party bus. You can't go very far, 2 kilometers, but and alcohol is quite expensive, actually. A beer of Windhoek Lager, 500 ml, is about 45 Rand. It's about the same as you'd pay. But a bottle of whiskey that I bought at the airport for 280 Rand was 800 Rand there. So this is Napoleon and his chick in the bar of the consulate. There were 2 video libraries. Another of the restaurants. This is Napoleon, some other old oak. And the map, again, a lot of poring over the map and teenagers who got up late. So we went past the gates of chaos, which sounds a bit like my daily run. We went to Lot's Wife's Ponds. You kind of, even though it's not very far, you do need to rent a car because it's incredibly windy. You can see the flax on either side. You can see the dryness to the south. We're heading to the sort of bottom southwest corner. The roads are pretty limited. Monica, this was your film. It's not really good. I'm driving, which is very good. We're driving down to Sandy Bay, which of course has different connotations to us. So you get to Sandy Bay, you strip off, you park your car, and this is a masked booby. There are no predators on the island, either on the land or on the sea. So sadly, we missed the whale sharks because they come in January, February. But you can see how incredibly kind of desiccated it is. There you can see the inappropriately named rock on the left, whatever you want to call it. These are called baby's toes. And they actually do feel like baby's toes. And they've got these incredibly beautiful fondants, but they're completely inundated with these things called those ones, yeah. And I mean, I know it's just the South Atlantic, but there was something very exotic about standing in the middle of the South Atlantic. And when you look south, and the next place you're going to hit land is Antarctica. In this place, you're going to hit anything is Antarctica. Oh, and it's volcanic. So I do a lot of guiding, and the dish du jour in Soweto is mkhudu, which is tripe. And this looks exactly like tripe. Because of the volcanic stuff. You won't catch me eating either of them. This is another moss booby, which I swear gave birth in the time that we went down and came back. I mean, if you look very carefully, you can see an egg and you can see I can see the baby's face, but you can't. I'm not going to tell you. This is this was the only beach that we saw, and it's a black beach. So this is my whining WhatsApp group. You can't walk on the beach. It's so hot because of the sun. But there's a fortification here that you can climb onto. And then some of the architecture in the central part of the island. It does vary amazingly from being incredibly dry to subtropical. And the vegetation is a mix of indigenous, and I mean, at times it looks a lot like England or New Zealand. So Diana's Peak, which you can see sort of there, is the highest peak of the island. It's 818 meters. And I walked, coincidentally, we were staying right at the bottom, at the entrance, right into, and there was a council meeting, which is looking to the south of the island. They're busy on a kind of flax removal program as much as they can, but the reality is they're never going to achieve it. But they are doing what they can to remove the flax. So once you go up to Diana's Peak, you reach a level where all the flax has been removed and it's more indigenous planting. I know that I sounded like a wheezing old geezer. I probably wouldn't have recorded this, or I would have cut myself out. Anyway, beautiful vegetation. So the first time I went up, it was quite misty, which is very atmospheric. Oh, God. I'm doing my discovery exercises. You'd think that I wouldn't be panting so much. Anyway, so this is the top of Diana's Peak, and it's very atmospheric. And I mean, if one does visit, which you're all going to do, Paddy, switch off your screen.
It's just come from Saint
Helena. Oh, okay. Yeah. You need to go when it's very atmospheric, but you also need to go when the sun is shining because it's so lovely. I mean, that's beautiful. It's exceptionally atmospheric. It's lovely. So I walked from where we were staying up over the top of Diana's Peak and then down the other side. And again, there are these charming Anglo-Saxon features and the moss growing on the wall. This is a bit of rude. I mean, the entrance into the town are forbidden to cyclists. I was going to take my bicycle, I must say. I'm pretty glad I didn't, because I'd be sounding a lot worse than I was sounding walking up the hill. Of course, Napoleon was incarcerated there. So was Dinizulu and his retinue. And in 1965, can you believe it, the English, they imprisoned 3 Bahrainis there as well. But the island reached the zenith of its population when they incarcerated 6,000 Boer prisoners there. It reached a population of 11,000. And now they're incarcerated. This is what I love about humanity. In the two Boer cemeteries. Why would there be 2? Obviously, one for the Republic of the Transvaal and one for the Republic of the Orange Free State. We are brothers. Why are we apart? Moving swiftly along. Anyway, so these are there are 180 Boer prisoners there. And chickens. So then I walked all the way down. I walked about 15 Ks that day, looking down onto the island. So then I went back the next day to Diana's Peak and sorry? Norfolk Island pine. It's the same view that I showed you earlier, but obviously it's clear now. So we're looking straight due east. And in fact, the house that we were staying in, Monica, you have to help me. I think it was this one here. I think that was Tudor house that we were staying in. But very, very beautiful. I mean, really, and this has all been cleared of flax. So this is the sustenance drink. And the cars are all numbered sequentially. This is number 1. We had been waiting for days to find number 1. So of course, when we found it, we had to photograph it. This is Jacob's Ladder, and on the right-hand side is the Saint Helena Museum, which is actually very sweet and very charming and very potent, packed with a lot of information. So Jamestown, this is not sort of facing, this is facing, this should be facing up. This is Jamestown is here. And actually, you know, considering how small it is, it's had a really, really packed information. The British, being the British, stripped everybody of their nationality in the 1990s and then returned it to them in the early 2000s. So now they actually got a British passport, and it's a Saint Helena passport, but they are now full British citizens. The Christmas celebrations continued. There was a fair amount of clubbing that night as well. And then I think this was our last day. Oh no, this was the top of Diana's Peak again. This is me as Wunderkind photographer. This is Monica having reached 814 meters. Mooi skoot, muis. And they do have a newspaper. The week after we left, the headline news was eggs and onions taken off for luggage. And the MV, the motor vehicle Helena, sailing away into the sunset, was basically the shipping company's not that interested in them, so they are not renewing their contract. I did actually do some snorkeling, considering my little white legs was quite interesting. That's the video library. And then, this was our last day. We headed south to the extreme southwest corner, looking down over places. What was quite nice is because it's so sort of higgledy-piggledy and windy, every day that you've done something, you get to look back on where you were the day before. So yeah, that's, you drive, park your car, and then walk. So Lot's wife's ponds were sort of round that corner there. And even though you've looked at the maps, once you've seen it, it all starts to, the jigsaw puzzle starts to make way. And on these postbox walks, whenever you get to the end, there is a postbox and a little stamp, and you can stamp. I was going to stamp my passport, but then I thought Elias Motsoaledi or whoever the Minister of Home Affairs would give me a hard time. And then there are 27 churches on the island, and Monica said she wanted to go to all of them. We went to none of them, except on the last day. But dying is a great thing here. George Singer, who met his death by being accidentally precipitated from off Egg Island while faithfully serving his employers. I mean, I want to die like that. Or Elizabeth, orphan and only child of Robert John and Louisa Hunter, later of Madras, who after a lingering and wasting sickness which yielded to no human remedy, was snatched from this sublunary scene. I had to look up sublunary. Sublunary means of this earth, as opposed to somewhere else. I don't know. On the 23rd day of December, whilst on her passage from India to England, aged 2 years old. My God, imagine if she'd grown up. This was the church. And then there was Matthew Isaac as well. What I liked about this, he departed this life in England on the 29th of August, 1831, deeply and justly lamented by his inconsolable family, his relations, and numerous friends. Okay, just so you all know what you need to put on Facebook when I'm and then on our last day, we went past Lockwood House, which is Napoleon's house where he died, and is still maintained by and paid for by the French. I'm not sure what happened after Brexit, but anyway. Evan went clubbing on the Friday night. We tried to go clubbing on Saturday night, but there was a party and it was closed until 11. Me up at 11. Not going to happen. Anyway, so this is on the way out. We went past the northeast corner of the island and we landed back up at Saint Helena Airport, which was kind of hilarious because when I had flown in a week before, the guy sitting next to me was an Egyptian who had worked on the airport, met a local, married her and had kids. And a week later, he was back at the airport as a security guy. And I greeted him extremely fondly, but I was a bit embarrassed, kind of keep it English. So left 8 days later. Remember to sit at the front on starboard side, in and out. Unfortunately, the weather wasn't great. And we flew back over Nambia, which has beautiful the sand dunes. And that's that. Muchas gracias.
Sure, now, I don't know about you guys, but I felt like we were looking at Jurassic Park or something similar. I was expecting you to pull out a dinosaur or two. But what a rich story. Thank you. Thank you so much. So first of all,
thank you.
A small token of our appreciation. Guys, just quick couple of questions. Let's start with our on-site audience. Mariam.
Would you recommend it?
We
need to just repeat the questions.
Would I go again? I went and I thought that was very lovely and I really, really enjoyed it. But I thought, that's great, but that's fine. I don't see myself going again. The funny thing is, I've made this movie and I spent a lot of time. I spent about 40 hours on it. And I don't know if it's my brain, but actually I would go again. The hikes, and this is the Exploration Society who are interested in hiking and that sort of stuff. I would go again for the hikes and the history. Well, and you've seen the history and it's tiny, but I would actually go again for the hikes. The flight, there's only one flight once a week from one city. Is about, I think the cheapest you're going to get is about 15,000 Rand on Discovery. You can get Discovery car because I got mine for 10, I think. And I would go again. Actually, it's expensive, but with proper planning, you can get the cost down. I had no idea what to expect. I literally took groceries with me, and you do need to take fresh.
Onions.
You need to take onions. You need to take eggs and onions. I have to be honest, I did smuggle eggs in because they did check at customs, but I didn't declare them. Because the choice of fresh fruit and vegetables is limited. But they do have stores. Alcohol, you need to take your own. And Edward Thorpe was incredibly helpful in terms of accommodation. So with planning, you can get the cost down. And yes, I would go again.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any good diving around that?
Is there any good diving? Yes, I think that there is. I'm not a huge diver, but I did go snorkeling in Jamestown Bay, and there are a lot of wrecks. And as I said, the whale sharks are there in January, February. So a friend of mine's child, Jack Jones, he went. I mean, I don't think it's the best in the world, but it's certainly an added bonus to everything else that you would want to do. The fishing is good, the diving is good, the hiking is good.
And sailing?
Well, I've heard of a number of people who've stopped off sailing either from the Cape to South America or back. So it's certainly, and I met a surprising number of Afrikaans-speaking South Africans who've become citizens. They've actually, I mean, the yacht club, I think it was on the Wednesday, had fish tacos night or something like that. So there certainly are, there are a number of yachts that are anchored there. So the sailing, yes, I did my 2 years in the Navy, and that's it for me. But there, yeah, it is an attraction point for sailors.
Okay.
Is the climate sufficient or good enough for wines? Stuff like that?
Is the climate sufficient for wines? It sits at,
wines and etc.
yeah, it sits at 15 degrees. So parts of the island are actually, you know, where we were was very misty. I would imagine that you could grow vines near where we were at Tudor House. It's very misty. So it would be a matter of finding
The temperature.
yeah, there's a huge range of climate types. So yeah, I would imagine that yes, you could find. And in fact, there was a woman who was making alcohol, but she was making it from something else. Get knotted. But we did go looking for it, but she had shut down. But yes, I would imagine that you could. I mean, there have been some attempts by South Africans actually at developing residences there. But I think the biggest problem is the lack of impetus. You know, there are only 4,500 to 4,500 people there. And a lot of the young people go to the Falkland Islands. So it's a very itinerant population. And they want the flight to go to Cape Town. But airline bureaucracy being what it is, I think at the end of 2024, they're going to have one flight a week to Joburg, one flight a week to Cape Town. So basically, the problem is if anybody wants to go there from anywhere in the world, they've got to come to Joburg.
British explorer William Herschel was there in the 1800s.
Yes.
Is there any memorial to him?
Not that I know of, but in fact, I meant to bring the Brut Guide. The Brut Guide is easily the best guide to the planet. I meant to bring it. There's quite a recent edition out. There's mention of him, but a memorial not that I know of. Yeah.
Anybody else? Lewis, from your side, any questions on Zoom?
Yeah, okay, well, Lisa says, lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you, Hugh. Nick Cowley says, I noticed on Diana Peak, there was a sign to Cuckold Point. Any intriguing stories behind that name? I don't know if you saw that.
English humor, I have no idea. I don't participate in it. Kind of behavior.
And then Janice said she climbed Jacob's ladder. Yoo-hoo! Terrifyingly high and extreme angle. We sailed from Cape Town. And
yeah, 699 steps. As far as I know, it's still closed. But we could ask Edward Thorpe. Yeah, I must say, climbing it would be fairly scary. I walked up the road, but it's a zigzaggy road. And the other fabulous question is they have 24-hour electricity.
The solar there, okay.
There was solar.
Yeah, so that's.
There was solar. Petrol, the wind, and I think there's a generator. Petrol is 50 rand a liter. But we only used half a tank in a week, so you know.
Once every 6 weeks, you can refill. And you think it's a fizzling out settlement? I mean,
This is is it a fizzling out settlement? It's a very pertinent question. I think they would vehemently deny that, but the odds, quite frankly, the odds are stacked against them. I mean, the young people, that they have a problem with sexual predators, sort of elderly gentlemen like me. You know, I did speak to a woman who she represents the Crown Judicial, whatever it's called. And it's a problem because, you know, all the young people either go to the Falkland Islands or do they go to the old country and they only come back. So the problem with tourism is very dependent on people coming, obviously. And the fact that the means of access are so complicated. I think the British Crown funds it to 50%, I'm not sure. So, I mean, I think the biggest form of support would be from people like us actually going. And we are particularly well positioned because we're in the one city that provides access. Because if anybody's going to come from anywhere in the world, they've first got to get to Johannesburg. So that's going to put people off. I mean, for example, I have written my essay for Tristan da Cunha, so I'm allowed. But to get there's a 6-day boat trip on an INJ fishing vessel. Yeah. It is beautifully maintained. There kind of there's this sort of English obsession. You know, with rules and that, you know, there is a rule on the roads because the roads are often very narrow, only for one car. So I think Monica says if you're going up, you have right of way. Yeah, if you're going up, you have right of way. So there is this English sensibility of doing things properly and right. And they don't say when they say hello. Very formal. It's very charming. It's very charming. And the English accents, there's a whole range of English accents, depending on who's speaking to who. No, they speak to each other. I don't necessarily understand it, but when I speak to them, I do. Yeah, Tesh?
Sorry, yeah. You mentioned bicycles not allowed to be sort of used in the agricultural towns. Could you go and cycle though? And
so the question is about cycling, and yes, it's because the roads are so steep that I think that bicycles are banned on 3 of the routes into Jamestown. But yes, you certainly could take a bicycle, and I'm by no means like a Cape Epic cyclist, but the problem is because it is so volcanic, if you go anywhere, you're going to have to go down and up and down and up. So you need to be quite a dedicated cyclist, but sort of getting round the island would be fine. Yeah. Say again?
Camping.
Camping would, I'm pretty sure it would be absolutely fine. I'm sure it would be fine.
cemetery and roll down the hill.
No, I mean, you're always going to find somewhere. I mean, I'm sure they're pretty chilled about it. There'll be the Brut guide. I mean, if anybody wants information, just contact me and I mean, if anyone wants to borrow the Brut guide, you're very welcome as well. And actually, in fact, if you look on their website, they've got a very comprehensive website, in spite of a terrible Wi-Fi connection. But it's quite comprehensive, and it's you'll find a lot of information. That's not an issue. Social problems.
there was, she was Swiss or something, prosecuted. They don't really have skills, because everyone who can, so they have to hire special skills. So people who come in for study, 2 or 3 years, about that, and it's prosecuted. So the first thing they asked, what, right? And she says they had,
Being South African.
The Zoom
so there was a big story about, the big story.
No, the Zoom people are not going to hear you.
That's
Um,
good.
But you can come here and talk. You thought you were going to get away with not speaking.
And now that you're the highlight, behind the scenes, we would love to have your face.
So the prosecutor gave us a story that they do have a big problem with, as you says, lots of grooming of 14-year-olds, 14 under, getting younger, sort of 12 to 14-year-olds. And that's because the older people do have money. And sometimes the mothers are complicit in this, in encouraging the grooming. And if they do get caught, it's a 15-year sentence. They do have a prison, and it's a 15-year sentence. So that's the big sort of scandal in the area. And then the other problem, they do go after the expats. So they have expats are charged quite often for drunk driving. And then during COVID, they had quite a strict lockdown during COVID. So the doctor was charged for having a soiree, I suppose, with all.
So was Boris Johnson.
Yeah. And then the other big crime on the island was a teenager stealing Donnie's boombox. Okay, it was a calamity because that meant that Donnie's was the club where the 60-year-olds boogie with the 15-year-olds could not have any music because Donnie's boombox was stolen.
But Donnie's is the one that refused us entry because it was
Of
a
the
private party.
Yeah.
So no sorry for
Yeah.
them. But there was also a drug smuggler, a Dutch drug smuggler he got a £5 fine and then escaped on a boat to Brazil.